Hello, everybody. How is everyone doing today?
Good.
Everyone get their flu shots and vaccinations and all that good stuff. Our our guest, our speaker today, Ariel, she's a little under the weather, so she'll have a camera off situation. So but her voice is loud and clear.
Yeah, just didn't want to subject you all to watching me blow my nose 50 times during this 50 minutes.
Well, some of us are like have hyper empathy, so thank you for that because we really feel for you. Okay. Okay, got a couple more joining in. Okay, so far we have 10 of us. Almost 5 after 3. So I'll just let
Hello.
as they sort of drop into the waiting room. But Errol, do you just want to get started then?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everyone for joining us at our second Living Ethics Hangout. This is, a bit of a different format. I'm not really going to do a lecture. I just wanted to hang out and talk about, what are kind of the ethics topics that are important to us and to you all and what your thoughts are on them. I will give the little kind of spiel that I think I'm going to give at the beginning of each of these of just what is ethics and why is it fun to hang out and talk about it. So, in my view of it, I trained as an anthropologist, like Dawn, and completed some postdoctoral work in bioethics or neuroethics or pragmatic health ethics. And so that is the area where I come to the study of ethics. I come from the study of like culture and people and meaning, and then looking at ethics. So what does ethics mean? Ethics generally, I would argue, I'm going to put forth that ethics is the study of good and bad, of harm and benefit. So key ethics questions are things like what is the good? What is the bad? What is a good life? How do we achieve a good life? What do we owe each other? And also just any situation where we're asking the question, what should we do here? These are ethics questions. They don't have to be framed with big fancy academic words or anything like that. Is really these things that we are living and going through every day. And that is why we're calling these Living Ethics Hangouts. And that comes from my postdoctoral work in Montreal with Eric Racine. The group there is building an international living ethics network. And we use the word living to mean a couple of different things. It's kind of a pun. It's living in that it is something that we live through, something we go through in our everyday lives. It's living in the sense that it is growing and changing, like all living things. And it's a little bit of a kind of a play on bioethics. If the bio in bioethics is life, but biomedicine has kind of, co-opted all of that sense of life, right? We're not talking about life only in a biological sense, but a holistic, biopsychosocial kind of sense. So those are all the puns that come into play with that. And I've been, trying to cultivate this space where we can just sort of chat about things. And one of the topics that came up at our last meeting and that we've elaborated a bit on the Discord channel is the topic of lies and lying, and maybe on its flip side, truth and truth telling, but particularly lies. Many personal and professional codes include injunctions and rules and ideas like you should not lie. But people debate what counts as a lie. Are white lies lies? What about secrets? What about masking in the spirit of Halloween? I was gonna get all dressed up, but my cold had other ideas. So no costume today, but putting on a costume, is that lying? What counts as a lie? And so that is what I wanted to talk to you all about today. And I just want to open the floor to anybody who wants to say anything about who they are, what interested you about this event today, and what kind of lies are you thinking about? What do you want to talk about today?
Hi, Ariel.
Hello.
Hi. Is it okay to speak, or does somebody else wants to go?
Please.
Share with us.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, first of all, can I just say thank you for having your camera off, because it makes me feel much better about having my camera off.
Of course, of course.
And I'm myself recovering from cold after cold, so I'm not in the best. I'm not looking my best, so to speak.
I know,
But
I feel you.
yeah, but lie is just such a interesting thing, and autistic person, and growing with certain expectations. Um, it's it's very complicated. It's very difficult, and I think for me there are two things that are important about lying. First of all, lying, I think, needs to have the intention to deceive, because if there is no intention to deceive, I know there is a lot of argument going on, at least about, well, if you say something that wasn't true, then you lied. But actually, what did you say it for, and what was your purpose when you were saying that? And if you're not aware that things are not true, then I, I think it's philosophically impossible to accuse the person of lying. That's the first thing. But I know that some of my colleagues unfortunately believe that if you said something untrue, whether you were aware of that being true or not, and whether you intended to deceive the other person, or that was your best information available to you at the time, you you committed the sin of lying. So that's one thing. The other thing about autism and lying, and I have to say, I've always been, well, part of the reason why I was always suspicious about the diagnosis of autism for myself is because I knew that I could lie. And the difference, and I see this in all the people that come to see me and that we talk about lying or, together. If the autistic person lies successfully, they practically have to invent a different reality. It's not just something that we can say to one person one thing and say the other thing to the other person, and then we can reconcile these two realities, virtual realities in our head, and conveniently evade all the possibilities if the two people meet, how we're going to, we're not good enough thinking on our feet. So what people told me, and that completely agrees with my own experience, for for us to lie, we have to basically prepare the whole story. So I was there. I never said this. I never did that. Instead, I was at that place at that time doing this, and this was what I was thinking about. And think about alibi. So, and it just becomes so complicated that it becomes too much going around lying. So the more I developed out of the, as a young person, the more complex my life became, the more of a bother it became to lie to people, because it's, I'm sorry, but my brain isn't able to process all that. And this is in agreement with everything else that other people told me, especially autistic women. Autistic men, for some reason, that's just my personal observation. I found that they are much worse at lying in general. But autistic women, especially if they are good actresses, and I know that I can act pretty well, they are very good at lying. But for that, they need a plan and they need to know in advance what they're gonna say and how they're gonna deliver it. So that was my.
Thank you. I'm taking so many notes here. I'll bring us back after we hear some thoughts and maybe follow up on some of these threads. Someone is, go ahead.
I wanted to say, like, the with autistic masking is basically like a lie to basically like, well, somewhat like a lie, but you're not really lying unless it's like they figure out anything. I guess if they figure out if they know you comfortably that if you are autistic, but if you just go up to if you're just with random people, and especially in girls, like someone said, like autistic masking for a certain amount of years, and they don't know you're on the autism spectrum, that's basically like a lie to like neurodivergent, like not like a neurodivergent, but like a neurotypical community.
Yeah. It's like you're wearing
basically you're lying to them, and how able-bodied you are, depending where you are leveled in the autism spectrum, how you are perceived on the spectrum too, because you can be like, let take for example, I don't people presume like I don't look autistic, but when I tell them, it's like, oh, you don't look autistic. Like they have this presumption you have to look like something like a like probably with Downs or something, or probably with like more probably with more learning disabilities. I don't know, or something that's not right with you. But anyways, my point to be exact is like people have different levels of autism on the spectrum. So like I feel like people just, I don't know. It's very complicated on the spectrum, and then it's also complicated to like read neurotypical, because you never know if they're lying because they are also have misconceptions about autistic people.
And I see written in the chat. For me, it's easier to spin like a politician, manipulate language, so you don't really have to lie outright. So there's also some.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the question, this sort of begs the question, why would we feel the need to lie in the first place? So, from my experience as an autistic person, a late diagnosed autistic person, and the people that I've come to know, that it's a self-preservation mechanism. And so if we don't learn to do that, then we suffer in different ways, and maybe more severely than if we don't figure out ways to protect ourselves with subtle omissions or things like that. So I don't know. I mean, I've seen this conversation about, oh, autistic people can't lie, but in my experience, that's not true at all. That's true maybe for some people, but it's not a generalization. I don't know. Masking for me, I see that question come up. I mask when I feel the need to protect myself from certain sorts of interactions. So is it a deception? Absolutely. It's absolutely a deception because I don't have whatever it is that day to deal with those kinds of interactions. So is there an ethical problem with me protecting myself? I don't know. That's an ethical question here given the context, but for me it's not. Is it an ethical question for people to decide to make rules that impinge on me negatively without my consent or even asking me? I think so, yes. I think that's the bigger ethical issue here. Not whether we do subtle things to protect ourselves from stigma and discrimination.
I think that's interesting because I was thinking my son is also autistic. And like he definitely lies the way a lot of kids do for self-preservation. You know, what happened to the, you know, who broke the back? I don't know. Or, you know, why did you not hand in your assignment? Oh, I forgot. And then it turns out that you just didn't do it or whatever, you know, which is a, typical. But what's interesting to me is that when he's caught in the lie, unlike I think a lot of other like maybe neurotypical kids, or as far as I know, it really hurts him. Yeah. To be called a liar, even when I have like blatant proof that he is lying, it's like, and I also suspect that he has a PDA profile, so that might be part of it. But it's like the ways to get around it. Of course, I think my love of truth kicks in. I'm like, but I know you did this. Stop lying to me. But you have to like somehow help him save face while also ensuring that he's gonna get the right message and not lie to me. It's a whole complicated dance. But it definitely comes from a place of self-preservation, not like maliciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we talk a lot about masking here, but is masking really a line? I think masking is just the effort, the extra effort we have to put into basically putting the social persona. And everybody has to wear a social persona. Nobody is going around there and just being themselves. If we all run as we are outside in the society wouldn't exist. We all have to adapt to each other. The difference for us is that we have to work extra hard to do that adaptation. And we basically come to midlife in autistic burnout. So I don't think it's lying. I think it's just us working too much and doing much more than an average person does in order to meet the societal expectations for whatever. I mean, there has to be some common rules for the society to function. It sucks to be us, and I'm working to promote the tolerance, and I'm working to promote the reasonable accommodations. But I cannot say that everybody should just be themselves and let's get on with it. I don't think the society can function like that.
No, I'm sorry for speaking too much, but Ariel, I wanted to speak to your initial prompt about what brought you here today. Why are you thinking about ethics? So, for me, the question is really one of the biggest ethical issues that I'm confronting right now is representation. So who speaks for us? Is there an us in the first place? So that's what I'm looking at, as a late diagnosed person, even though I came from an extremely poor background and a broken family, and there are a lot of intersecting factors here. There's still an issue of who can I speak for? How do I actually? I'm looking at intersectionality in particular. My topic is about invalidating experiences among
Preach
diagnosed people
it!
in the U.S. So that's what I'm looking at, but it's really difficult. So the question is, if my black peers are saying, you do this work, and my committee says, no, you can't, who should I be loyal to? For me, there's an ethical issue there.
Wow.
Fascinating.
So I'd appreciate, I see your hand.
All right, we
Come back to it.
absolutely. Yeah, please go ahead. You are muted.
Thanks. I just do the hand because I don't know how to butt in.
or when is it time? So aside from the childhood stuff that I mentioned, I think all children do that. They cheat at Candyland and stuff, you know. But aside from that, I have always had a very hard time lying and always questioning ethics in general. I work as a licensed professional where I do have ethics, and there's like bending of rules, gray areas, and I feel comfortable with that. But you know, they've always told me as an adult that, you know, brutal honesty, you know, your brutal honesty. And so I think what I've learned since I found out I was autistic, that I've been trying to learn to do white lies because I think it's masking and it helps me get along with more people because they don't like the truth. And I'm okay with the truth. I had a rough upbringing and all that. Same, you know, grew up with not enough money and broken home and all that. And so I just, yeah, it's interesting. It does cross a lot. To be autistic and self-preserve, you're gonna lie, and yet what are you really lying about? Just who you are, and you can't be who you are. It's not accepted. So I think that's fair. But yeah, in the white lie situation, the hardest thing for me is invites and details and how do you say no, or what do you say for the truth, and it's just a lifelong problem. And then if I say the truth, I'm brutally honest, and they don't like that either. So I think I'm trying to learn to white lie as a way to get along. That's what I had to say about that.
Thank you. And we have comments in the chat. Masking is perceived as a lie, but it isn't. It's self-preservation. I think it's ethical unless the masking is harming others. And my youngest is also autistic, and they have a terrible time lying. They just can't do it very easily, if at all. And I want to call in that I'm sort of hearing a trend in here too with this discussion of like, is masking a lie? Do other people think it's a lie? Do I think it's a lie? Is also sort of being forced into that role, you know, whether it's lying or not lying, but being forced into you know, having to mask. And this was a theme that I saw you know, when I was kind of preparing for this session. I had asked, you know, if anyone has any memes they want to share. And if you do and want to share your screen, just let us know. We can give you the power to do that, I think. But excuse me. But some of the things that I saw, you know, on these memes are like, neurotypicals expect me to lie all the time. So I was wondering if you could sort of tell me about situations where you have to lie but you don't want to lie, or situations where like it's really ethically imperative to lie, that you should lie.
For me, I think the hardest thing is that neurotypical people don't want to say the truth when the truth is hard. And so they say lots of words that go in a circle around the truth. And after my mom died, and I didn't know what the hell was going on, and one sister's like disowning me, and the other sister's trying to explain to me what's wrong. And for 1/2 hour on the phone in this terrible situation, she was trying to deal with me and explain to me what I've done wrong, and I didn't get it. And these are the most challenging things in life to me, is that they don't speak the truth, and they don't like the truth. I have a great meme I'm gonna look for right now.
I think I did not share the right screen the first time, so hopefully you can see it now.
Can I just say something? Wouldn't it
Of
also be
course.
can it also be a lie, but people perceive it differently too? Like if people are diagnosed medically and self-diagnosed when they're trying to prove it, and then the medical diagnosed say, "Oh, you're self-diagnosed. Well, prove it if you're self-diagnosed, or if you're self-diagnosed, do you have any information?" And that's hard to detail because you just are self-diagnosed, and it's not a medical diagnosis. how do you perceive that? Is that a lie from the self-diagnosed perspective? Who is actually self-diagnosed and who is actually mentally diagnosed?
Yeah, I mean, that opens up a whole nother can of worms. I mean, that's one of the things I'm looking at sideways is sort of what I call lateral invalidation. You know, so the whole argument in the autistic groups online in particular about that very thing. You know, who can be autistic and who can claim it and who can't. Disregarding the very real barriers and obstacles to accessing an assessment for so many people. Not only that, the just disgusting inconsistencies in assessment themselves for people. So for me, that argument is a real sticking point.
It's interesting to connect those two dots. So when my son was evaluated, I am self-diagnosed. But when my son was diagnosed, the thing came out. It said meets the criteria for. And my little brain was like, well, they're not saying he's diagnosed. They're saying that he has the symptoms because they're talking around the truth instead of just saying, which I don't know if that's an academic thing or an insurance thing. But for a long time, I thought that meant, like, he's not diagnosed, but he meets the criteria for he shows the symptoms for, and, we might as well treat him like, and it never occurred to me that meant he was diagnosed.
Can I just say that it's basically medical speak covering your ass and saying that you meet the diagnostic criteria is a different way of saying you're diagnosed without saying the diagnosis. Somehow it feels like, it feels more objective and less subjective. This is why they love to use this phrasing.
Yeah, it's very literal and very hedging. And yeah, it's weird. It's a lie, but it's not a lie.
Yeah, I mean, so part of the dynamic is that a lot of people have internalized the authority of these clinicians, even though if I spent my comps looking at sort of a history of autism as a concept, and there is nothing settled in that history. I mean, there's very few things settled or that people even agree on, and in fact, it's still debated whether it's valid across all sorts of contexts in the first place. So again, we're talking about epistemic authority. That someone doesn't have the authority to know themselves or to speak for themselves. So that's also a problem. If you look at the work of Monique Botha, he literally said to her that she lacked the ability to write about her own experience. So there's another dynamic at play here, and that's medical hegemony. So that's one of the things that we're being pushed back by is that, and that also is operating within the autism groups online. So people have internalized that, and then they use that as a weapon against other people seeking. So I'd like to hear some thoughts about it. We're talking ethics here, so for me that is a major ethical quagmire.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can turn it to, when we talk about epistemology, we talk about knowledge, right? Whose knowledge counts, who gets to know things, who gets to know about what, and what are things that, excuse me, what are things that you can know. And this reminds me of someone's comment earlier that, a lie is when someone can be defined. One definition of a lie could be when someone knows something is not true and wants to deceive you. But there's other situations where someone could say the exact same words, but they just don't know the thing that they said was untrue. Like in my own life, I'm often giving my dog a hard time for making me a liar, quote unquote, because I will say something like, oh, she's so good, she never does X, and then she'll immediately go and do the thing I said she never does. I'm like, you made a liar out of me. But, I didn't know that it wasn't true at the time I was saying it, so maybe I'm being a little harsh on myself and on the dog. That was a really long preface just to say, so, where do you see the role of whose knowledge counts in these ethical discussions? Yeah, my poor dog. She's so miserable right now, sleeping on a giant poof right next to me. She's very happy.
I just want to say that, everybody everybody's talking about the medics having hegemony on knowledge, and I have to admit I underestimated and underappreciated that.
I also want to draw that connection, back to epistemic authority, and it sounds like in a lot of ways, and we know that you are not alone in this experience, unfortunately, that, by not believing you, these authorities are essentially saying that you are lying, right? And this really shows the harm that comes from that accusation.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you look at increased rates of mental issues, so-called mental issues, suicidality amongst autistic people, they're pretty alarming, actually.
Someone had also written in the chat, another issue here is that a lot of autistics' faces don't have the musculature to make the subtle faces that the neurotypicals want. They judge our faces instead of our words, and also we need longer to process what they're saying and look confused. And I know this is something that I have, heard people grappling with in the medical field. So I'm working currently and in my last position at a medical school, with things like pain, right? Like there's a pain scale on a scale of 1 to 10, like how much pain are you in? And there is the way that physicians judge someone's face. Often these scales will go side by side. There will be the pictures of different faces and the numbers underneath. And I have heard from autistic people, and others have said, I said my pain was a 5, and they're like, you don't look like you're in the amount of pain as a 5. Or, the higher it is, kind of the worse it seems to be for people believing people. And this also has consequences on, diagnosis, on treatment, on medication, in all sorts of settings.
Yeah, I was gonna. I've been to the age of being prescribed as our physical therapist, and go on to say, I mean, if I show my pain, I won't be able to hear clearly and directly what's being said, so I'm going to mask my pain as much as possible. I'm going to ask you to say 5. But yeah, I'm not showing my pain because I'm listening to you and trying to hear everything. And the other part of that I think ties to lying is like the scale, let's say 10 is the worst pain you can imagine, or the worst pain you've ever been in your life, and so my literal brain is like, well, I've hurt myself pretty bad. I've had major surgery. Like, and I have a pretty good imagination. So, like, yeah, I have this aching pain in my back day in and day out. But compared to, what I can imagine, that's like a 3 or a 4.
Yeah, I mean, wow, it's like I don't even think like this most of the time, but sort of meant to be sort of scenario just keeps coming up. I mean, I was also diagnosed with fibromyalgia. It runs in my family. My mother had it. My grandfather had it. My has it now. And this issue of pain has been a thorn in our side. Dismissal, excruciating pain. I don't perceive certain types of pain in the same way that I guess people are supposed to. So I don't show that either, but that's been an issue. So looking into this and then having my youngest dismissed by a male physician, but still, but just them in tears after this event just really sort of just stoked that fire. So I found a Dutch study from the early 2000s starting there. It's called, they were looking at invalidation experiences for people with chronic illness like rheumatism, fibromyalgia. Their comparison was rheumatism, or rheumatic arthritis, and rheumatoid arthritis, and fibromyalgia. So visible, invisible sort of things in some degree, measurable, not measurable. And so they developed a whole scale, which I'm looking to adapt. That's part of the reason that this makes studies. It's like, how do we measure this systematically? Because no one fucking believes us when we talk about this. You've all just re-emphasized that. People don't believe you when you talk about it. So how do we systematically collect data on this to say, look, here's the stories, here are the numbers to back this up? So they validated the scale across 6 languages, and it held across all of those different studies. So there's something there, and they were really interrogating patients being invalidated by not just their physicians, but service workers, family members, co-workers, all of these things. So they developed sort of a taxonomy, if you would, of invalidation around illness, invisible illness in particular. Because no one listens to us. There are a million pages on this stuff at least right now, but people don't have time or the interest in reading that stuff. So how do you make it simple for them? So, people that speak p-values, they're only going to listen to p-values. So it's just like again, that's another ethical issue here. Discounting what someone tells you to your face, that's a breach of first do no harm. So that's how I look at this. I've experienced this sort of nonsense from physicians for many years now, and seen it with my mother as well, and now seeing it with my children. So for me, that's a breach of ethics. So how do we turn this around and say, look, you guys who say you set up the ethical rules here, you're breaking them all. You're not even listening to yourself. So we need a conversation about this. So I'm sorry, I'm hot about this right now. I'm really hot about that right now.
Thank you. And I'll throw in respect as well, an ethical principle, right? Believing someone is sort of fundamental to respecting someone. What'd you like to say?
Hi. Okay, I'm really nervous to talk on here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So, which kind of goes along with what you were talking about, what this brings up. I feel like there's something maybe along the lines of in line with the double empathy problem, and I'm sort of just about into my late discovery, so just in all the deep dives of learning all the stuff. But one thing I'm noticing, and now like going up down seeing it in my parents and seeing it in my children, and being in a doctor's office and trying to advocate and seeing the dismissal, recognizing my past of years of dismissal and trying to just know that I'm going in, knowing that I've always known what I've known. So what's my point around that? I feel like with the line, and I've noticed this happen not just in a doctor setting where there's higher stakes there, but just with interactions with friends, that with this, going back to the slow processing, I find myself doing like sort of like this, like slow down, and I'm seeing their face and their reaction, and I'm not able to quickly get to what I want to say. And so maybe in a doctor's office, it's like I want to be able to describe my symptoms or what's going on in a really coherent way, but I see sort of the shutdown on the other person's face. So I start to like pick it up, and I kind of get in this cycle where I recognize I'm losing the plot, and their face, they're just getting further and further away from like, and so I just get really like, no, you don't understand, or it feels very like it pulls apart. Like I'm just not gonna even, I'm trying so hard to really be coherent, and then it gets further away and the plot is lost. And so there's this disconnect. So you're talking about like, I don't know what the answer is, but it seems like just, again, high stakes in a medical setting, how is there, and the system is broken, right? You have 15 minutes to go in or 30 minutes appointments. You can't like sit there and be like, well, I have asked recently, like, this is what it means for me. I need a little more time to process. And in that one particular setting, it was given. But I guess I don't know what the answer is with that. It feels like the slow processing, there is a piece of that where it just snowballs into a miscommunication that then increases the likelihood that we are misunderstood because we're sort of not being able to get some of those facts across.
And there's something also I wrote on the chat, and it's hard for me to like listen and look at the chat. And I don't. She was mentioned something about feeling sick with the line, and this is just another tangent, but I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dr. Megan Anna Neff. She has a podcast, but she talks on the subject of autism. And I believe it's from her podcast, and I'm not sure if it's totally true. But she referred to lying, feeling a lie, or carrying a lie as a moral injury, and it really stuck with me, and I can't remember all the details around that, but that wrote about it in the chat, just that feeling of like the visceral and having to carry, in my case in particular, like, if someone tells you something and says, well, don't tell, and sort of in my family dynamic, that has, it really, I don't know, for what it's worth, it being called a moral injury just really hit home. Like, it sort of felt like that, and like this thing to carry. And I guess I'm speaking of being asked to carry somebody else's big lie and what that felt like instead of what it feels like to tell a lie. It's just like when a lie was put upon me. So I guess those are two different things. And thanks for giving me the space to process that. I was like, okay, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Two big important things, and what you're saying is resonating with people in the chat. I too have trouble following sort of all of it, so apologies, I'm not revoicing everyone, but I am reading everyone. And shares, I had an osteopath blacklist me from his practice because I would not say my lived experience didn't happen. The medical gaslighting is real. And I just want to highlight that gaslighting is definitely another one of the themes that came up the last Living Ethics Hangout that we had, and sort of part of the motivation for talking about lying today and how that's sort of intertwined when, you know, how do people lie to you, and how do you cope with that? I also wanted to, we've got just a few minutes left. We're a few minutes before 4. I'm in another group where they do this, so I'm trying it out. I want to give some space here to say, you know, anybody else who hasn't spoken yet, you do not have to speak up, but if you were waiting for a specific invitation, I want to make sure I offer that invitation. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'd like to.
Yes, please.
So for me personally, lying, I'm sensitive. You know, I was the one that says I have a visceral response. I've never quite understood why I have such a strong physical response to it, but it makes a little more sense now. But one other thing that I want to expand onto it, which is kind of a really big topic, is that lying ties into bigger things like manipulation, gaslighting, you know, more troublesome behaviors that, and for me, part of why I have such a strong reaction to it is because my mom's narcissistic. And she is exactly that. She lies, she manipulates, she gaslights. My brother and I grew up with that. So I have a very strong aversion to be the exact, to not be that, to be the exact opposite. So honesty and truth is very important to me, to the point that the slightest deviation is sickening to me. And anything narcissistic, anything like my mother is sickening to me, and I basically have PTSD because of what I went through growing up. And I think you guys could probably figure out the rest.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know it is a difficult thing, and you are definitely having some support in the chat. This resonates with other folks here as well. So thank you for talking with us, and I'm glad you feel like you can. Yeah. All right, we've got about 5 more minutes. Any further thoughts to develop? Yeah.
I was hoping to say, yeah, so being late diagnosed, and I think one of the most common things I've learned in my studies, and then especially with these live Zooms, most of us have suffered the wrong and bad feelings, like we knew something was wrong, we're not okay, we're always messing up, we're always having people mad at us. And I know for me, it's trouble with friends and relationships, and I couldn't figure it out, and nobody could help. And so I think part of it is, yeah, a lot of trauma in that way, but we tend to think it's us. And so we're nervous about even saying the truth. And so I think, it's hard what I'm trying to say, but basically we're already behind the 8 ball in general in society, and so it's extra important to love ourselves and figure out how to, what's similar about us, that we can find anecdotes. Like I just found out about this envelope in the you can have in your glove compartment in case you get pulled over, because I sometimes go catatonic. I can't speak or think, or my face looks like I'm dead, if I get into a certain trauma with neurotypicals. So yeah, I it's harder than it is for most people to understand what is right and wrong, what is a lie, what's not a lie. Everybody else seems to be okay with it's lonely out here. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Anyway.
He makes perfect
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I think so. It reminds me of just in the last moment here, I'll share this other meme if I can remember how to do it. Okay. Now I think I'm sharing the right one. So this one says, "Look at me, I'm a neurotypical. I give weird hints about things
Instead of just telling people.
And I think, for a final thought, if anyone has any thoughts, I think I said earlier, we never know if neurotypicals are lying. Like, what is this sort of, what's going on here? What's going on here? What do you experience from neurotypicals? And Roger, do you have the Discord invite link to share? I think I can find it, but I'm not very good at Discord.
Yes, I will put that in the chat. Just give me a minute. I'll do that right now.
Yeah.
Same, Ariel. I find Discord very unusual.
I like having it. I just don't know how to use it.
Really, very much.
Same. They're quite friendly.
All right, the
And
link
we
should
do
be
have
there.
the link in the chat. And I'll also say, if you're looking for any extra eyes on, I'm currently on a funded autism-related project, so I have
Some experience.
talking them into it, and I'd be happy to help.
Okay.
I have
Thank
a very
you very much.
Googleable name, so should be able to find it.
Okay, thank you so much. And I see you. Thank you.
All right, so we are up at 4 o'clock, so I think I'm going to sort of close it. I'll hang around for a few more minutes if anyone has anything extra they want to talk about or catch me, a little more one-on-one, but I'll kind of close down the formal part here and say thank you for thinking through these tough issues and all the many, many different facets. I feel like we could have like a whole year of hangouts just on this one topic, but we may have a different topic for next time. So if there's anything else that you want to talk about, let me know, by email, on the meetup group, on the Facebook group, on the Discord. This is, I'm just here to facilitate. It's your space for whatever you'd like to talk about.
Thank you. That was my only question. Is this happening weekly? But you did that. So thank you.
We've got every other month. So I think our next one is in January. And we try to put it at different times as well, because we know, some people are asleep right now, some people are in class right now, or at work right now. So we've tried to sort of stagger the time so everyone can get at least some chance to spend time with us. I want to say hi. I see your wave. I don't want to turn my camera on so you can't see my wave back, but know that I'm waving at you.
Yes, I should add for folks who are interested, we're thinking about doing something more frequently. And I know this is Ariel's stressing that this is hanging out, this is informal. It is every other month, and we do, we talk about some visceral issues, and I do think that's greatly needed, as today's session has clearly demonstrated. On the other end of it, we used to do these things called happy hour events weekly, which were people just sort of hanging out and talking about like super light stuff. So we do like table topics whatever people wanted to do. That was fun. So that was something that we're thinking about having more regularly. So if you're interested, then let me know. We're trying to figure out if there's enough interest in this to give it a decent launch.
Yeah, Roger, I'll just say, yeah, I mean, sounds great. I mean, there's the Autism Society hosts a weekly, they do several weekly events, some for 18 plus, some younger, some more to narrow, but they're really wonderful. And a lot of us really depend on those. So, and I think it was, yeah, you were talking about solidarity, people coming together. For me, that's the place where some of those dynamics of online social media groups don't exist. They don't function in the same way in these smaller in-person groups. So I think there's a lot of potential for sort of developing a little more sort of collective agreement about what we're doing here and why in those smaller spaces. So you get my vote.
And I've seen in these groups that people are respectful, intelligent, truthful, and we're all kind of validating each other's suffering, and it's just been amazing.
Yeah, I think one of the common threads that I've seen is that there's an alignment on principles that are, I think, a lot of folks kind of universally hold in the groups, which I think is why they tend to go so well. Things like respect, autonomy, people, being able to say what they need, not needing to lie or, mask. All of that stuff is sort of the social norm in these groups. So it's, you come into these spaces with that as the definition of the group, and then you can really experience some beautiful communication. I would say that the rest of the world probably can learn a lot from what we're doing here.
Yeah, the irony that we're considered the people with communication difficulties. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's really ironic, actually. I just learned recently that some of the emotional AI systems, those large language models, they were actually trained on research that was aimed at basically autistic people, how they interpret and identify facial expressions and emotions, how they read language. So they're actually training these AI bots using that kind of research, which I thought was really intriguing because I've had some interesting dialogues, if you would, with chatbots lately about this thing. So I could see that that learning is there because of the way they respond. So I think there's some really interesting things happening here to what you were talking about there, Roger.
I really do think that within the neurodiverse lens, everything becomes infinitely more interesting. And I'm glad that we have a lot of people having these conversations because I think it's just going to grow. Great. So awesome, everyone. So unless anyone else has any questions, Ariel, did you want to say any last remarks from you, or not? We'll just sort of close it out. And then if you guys are part of the meetup, that's where we announce all of our events. But we also cross-post these things on the Facebook groups. So you'll also get access to the direct links on those groups.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for having me, and to Roger for hosting here, and hope to see you all around.
Thank you. Bye-bye.